Blood was still dripping slowly from the IV line into Elara's arm, a rhythmic and crimson reminder of the trauma her body had just endured. She clutched her newborn son, Noah, against her chest, her arms trembling not from joy, but from a profound and terrifying exhaustion. The hospital room should have been a sanctuary, a place of quiet peace where a family bonded over new life. Instead, it felt like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided, and the executioners were standing at the foot of her bed wearing designer suits and cruel smiles. The silence of the room was shattered by the sound of heavy paper hitting the thin hospital blanket. Victoria, her mother-in-law, had thrown the document with such force that it slid down and rested against Elara's leg. It was a thick stack of legal paperwork, the edges sharp and cold against the warmth of the moment. Elara looked down, her vision blurring slightly from the medication and the tears she was fighting to hold back. The bold text at the top of the page was impossible to miss. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Sign it, Victoria hissed, her voice dripping with the kind of venom usually reserved for sworn enemies, not the woman who had just birthed her grandson. She stood tall and imperious, her Chanel suit perfectly pressed, looking at Elara as if she were a stain on the pristine hospital floor. We are done pretending, Elara. You are going to sign those papers. You are going to take the settlement. And you are going to disappear. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She looked past Victoria, searching desperately for the one person who should have been protecting her. Marcus stood near the window, his back turned to the city skyline, but he refused to meet her eyes. He studied the floor tiles with a cowardice that made Elara's stomach churn. Beside him stood Serena, the woman Victoria had always wanted for Marcus. The woman who came from the right family, went to the right schools, and had the right bank account balance. Serena stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. She was dressed for a gala, not a hospital visit, in a silk dress that cost more than Elara had pretended to earn in a year. But it wasn't the dress that caught Elara's attention. It was the ring. On Serena's left hand, catching the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room, sat a vintage 3-carat diamond ring. Elara felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with labor. That was her ring. It was the heirloom Marcus had given her on their wedding day, the one she had noticed missing from her jewelry box 3 weeks ago. Before we find out how Elara handled the ultimate betrayal, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. You won't want to miss the moment she reveals who she really is. Serena smirked, raising her hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, deliberately flashing the diamond. He is happier this way, Elara, Serena said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. We have been together for months. Marcus needs a partner who understands his world, not a charity case he picked up at a fundraiser. You had to know this day was coming. Men like Marcus don't stay with women like you. Elara looked down at Noah, who was sleeping peacefully, unaware that his father was standing 5 feet away, letting 2 women destroy his mother. The betrayal was total. It wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy. They had waited until she was at her absolute weakest, physically broken and emotionally open, to strike. They wanted to crush her when she had no energy to fight back. What is happening? Elara whispered, her voice raspy and dry. Marcus, look at me. We just had a son. How can you do this? Marcus finally looked up, but his eyes were empty. There was no love, no regret, only a vague annoyance that this was taking so long. It's for the best, Elara, he said, his voice flat. My parents are right. We are from different worlds. This marriage, it was a mistake. I have a responsibility to the family legacy. Serena fits that legacy. You don't. Victoria stepped closer to the bed, her shadow falling over Elara and the baby. We are generous people, she said, her tone icy. We have prepared a check for $50,000. It is more money than you would see in a lifetime working your little graphic design jobs. Take it, start over somewhere else. But there is one condition. Arthur, Elara's father-in-law, spoke for the first time. He was a large man who took up space with an air of unearned authority. He pulled another document from his jacket pocket. Custody, he grunted. You are destitute, Elara. You have no family, no assets, and a studio apartment in a bad neighborhood. You cannot provide for a purely bred heir of our family. You will sign over full physical and legal custody of the child to Marcus. The heir left the room. Elara clutched Noah tighter, her knuckles turning white. "You want my son?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and rising panic. "You think I would sell my child for $50,000? "We are not asking," Victoria snapped. "We are telling. If you refuse to sign, we will bury you in legal fees. We will drag you through court until you are homeless. We will paint you as an unstable, unfit mother who trapped a wealthy man with a pregnancy. By the time we are done, you won't even get supervised visits. Be smart, girl. You are a nobody. We are the establishment. You cannot win against us." Serena laughed softly, a cruel, tinkling sound. "Oh, let her keep the baby for a few weeks, Victoria. It will be so hard for her without a nanny. Once she realizes she can't afford diapers, she will come crawling back to give him to us anyway. Look at her, she is pathetic." Elara looked at them. Really looked at them. She saw the arrogance in Arthur's posture. She saw the sadistic glee in Victoria's eyes. She saw the smug entitlement on Serena's face. And she saw the weakness in Marcus, a man who let his mommy fight his battles while he stood by and watched his wife bleed. For the last 9 months, Elara had played the role of the submissive, poor daughter-in-law. She had worn simple clothes. She had driven a 10-year-old sedan. She had lived in the modest apartment she claimed to rent. She had bitten her tongue when Victoria insulted her upbringing. She had lowered her head when Arthur made jokes about her financial status. She had done it all because she wanted to believe that love could bridge the gap between their worlds. She wanted to be sure that if Marcus loved her, he loved her for Elara, not for her bank account. But the test was over. And they had all failed spectacularly. The trembling in Elara's hands stopped. The tears that had been welling in her eyes evaporated, replaced by a dry, scorching heat. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in 2 years, not since she sat in a boardroom and dismantled a competitor who tried to hostilely take over her corporation. It was the feeling of absolute, ice-cold clarity. They thought she was a frightened deer caught in their headlights. They had no idea they were poking a sleeping dragon. Elara looked down at the divorce papers. Then she looked at the custody agreement. She gently adjusted the blanket around Noah, making sure his ears were covered. When she looked back up at Victoria, the fear was gone from her face. Her expression was blank, unreadable, and terrifyingly calm. "You are right about one thing, Victoria," Elara said, her voice steady and devoid of the raspiness from moments before. It sounded different now. It was the voice of a woman who commanded rooms of 1,000 people. "We are from different worlds. But you are confused about which world is which." Victoria blinked, taken aback by the sudden change in tone. "Excuse me?" Elara reached over to the bedside table, but instead of picking up a pen to sign the papers, she picked up her smartphone. She tapped the screen twice and dialed a number. She pressed the speakerphone button and held the device up. The line rang once. "Yes, Miss Vance?" A man's voice answered, crisp and professional. This was Julian, her chief of staff, a man who managed her schedule, her security, and her $3.7 billion portfolio. "Julian," Elara said, keeping her eyes locked on Arthur. "I need you to execute Operation Clean Slate immediately." There was a pause on the other end, followed by the sound of rapid typing. "Understood, Miss Vance. Are we proceeding with the acquisition of the debt?" "Yes," Elara said coldly. "Buy it all. The manufacturing plant, the downtown real estate holdings, and the personal loans, every single cent of debt attached to the name Montgomery. I want it in my portfolio within 10 minutes. Arthur frowned, a look of confusion crossing his face. "Who is that? What are you talking about? You don't have any portfolio." Elara ignored him. "And Julian," she continued, "the hospital board, call the chairman. Tell him I am revoking the anonymity on my donation for the new pediatric wing." "The $40 million donation?" Julian asked. "Correct," Elara said. "Have them put the signage up today. I want the name Elara Vance above the door before I check out." She hung up the phone and set it back on the table with a deliberate click. The room was silent. The kind of silence that happens right before a bomb detonates. Victoria laughed nervously, looking at Arthur. The stress has made her delusional. She thinks she is making business deals. It is sad, really. Arthur wasn't laughing. He was staring at Elara, his face slowly draining of color. He had been in business long enough to recognize the tone of voice Elara had just used. It wasn't the voice of a graphic designer. It was the voice of a predator. "You have 24 hours to vacate your mansion," Elara said, her voice casual, as if she were discussing the weather. "I own the mortgage now. And since you have missed your last 3 payments, something I learned when my auditors went through your books this morning, I am foreclosing." "What?" Marcus stepped forward, looking between his parents and his wife. "Mom, what is she saying?" "She is lying," Victoria shrieked, though her voice wavered. "She is a penniless orphan. She is trying to scare us." Elara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was sharp and dangerous. "Oh, Victoria. You really should have done a better background check. You saw a girl in a cheap dress and assumed she was nothing. You didn't realize that I wear cheap clothes, because I don't need to impress people like you." Elara reached into the bag Julian had left for her earlier, a bag Victoria had assumed contained dirty laundry. She pulled out a tablet and threw it onto the bed, the screen glowing with a financial dashboard. The logo at the top read Vantage Tech Systems. "Do you know who the CEO of Vantage Tech is?" Elara asked softly. Serena gasped. Everyone knew Vantage Tech. It was the largest software conglomerate in the hemisphere. The CEO was a recluse, a woman known only as E.V., who had built an empire from nothing by the age of 25. "No," Serena whispered, stepping back, her hand covering the stolen ring. "That's impossible." Elara leaned back against the pillows, looking like a queen on her throne. "My name is Elara Vance. My net worth is just under $4 billion. And you have exactly 5 minutes to get out of my hospital room before I have my security team arrest you for harassment and theft." The war had begun. And they had brought a knife to a nuclear explosion. To understand the sheer magnitude of the mistake the Montgomery family had just made, one had to rewind the clock. One had to look past the hospital room, past the divorce papers, and past the crying infant to see the woman Elara Vance actually was. They called her a gold digger. The irony was so thick it was suffocating, because what Victoria, Arthur, and Marcus didn't know was that Elara had more money in her liquid checking account than their entire family had generated in 10 lifetimes. But she hadn't started that way. Her story began in tragedy, not luxury. When Elara was 19 years old, a car accident on a rainy highway in Ohio took both her parents instantly. She was left with nothing but a mountain of medical debt, a small life insurance policy that barely covered the funeral, and a terrifying sense of isolation. She dropped out of college, not because she wasn't smart enough, but because she couldn't afford the tuition. She moved into a studio apartment the size of a closet, and ate instant noodles while working 3 jobs. But Elara had a secret weapon. She had a mind that understood code better than it understood people. While her peers were partying, she was teaching herself advanced algorithms and artificial intelligence architecture. She built an operating system in her free time, fueled by grief and a desperate need to survive. At 22, she launched Vantage Tech Systems from a laptop she had repaired with duct tape. By 25, she was a millionaire. By 28, she was a billionaire. However, wealth came with a price tag Elara hadn't anticipated. Every man she dated after her success saw the dollar signs before they saw her eyes. They fell in love with her portfolio, not her personality. They wanted to know what she could buy them, where she could take them, and who she could introduce them to. After 3 failed relationships that ended when she realized she was just a walking bank account, Elara made a vow. The next time she fell in love, it would be real. She would hide the money until she was certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the man loved Elara the orphan, not Elara the CEO. She met Marcus 2 years ago at the Starlight Charity Gala in New York City. It was the premier event of the season, a gathering of old money and new tech giants. Elara was there as the anonymous donor who had just written a $5 million check to the Children's Hospital. She hated the spotlight, so she dressed simply that night, wearing a plain black dress she had bought off the rack, avoiding the diamonds and silks that the other women wore like armor. She had stepped away from the crowd to take a breather near the kitchen entrance when a waiter collided with her, spilling a tray of champagne down the front of her dress. It was a mess. As she was dabbing at the stain with a napkin, Marcus appeared. He was handsome, charming, and seemingly kind. He offered her his handkerchief and made a joke about the hazards of high society. But then he said something that changed everything. "Don't worry," Marcus had said with a sympathetic smile. The catering manager is a friend of mine. He'll make sure you don't get in trouble for the spill. It's hard work being on your feet all night serving these snobs, isn't it? He thought she was a server. He thought she was part of the catering staff. For a split second, Elara almost corrected him. She almost laughed and told him she could buy the catering company, the venue, and the tuxedo he was wearing without blinking. But she stopped. For the first time in years, a man was looking at her without calculating her net worth. He was being kind to a server. It felt genuine. It felt safe. So, Elara lied. Yes, she said softly. It is very hard work. That lie became the foundation of their entire relationship. When he asked her out, she told him she was a freelance graphic designer struggling to make ends meet. It was a plausible cover. It explained why she was always on her computer and why she dressed simply. When he picked her up for dates, she waited outside a modest, brick apartment building in Brooklyn. It looked like a regular, working-class building. What Marcus didn't know was that Elara had purchased the entire building for $45 million through a shell company a year prior. She owned every brick, every window, and every lease. Her assistant, Julian, and her best friend, Maya, were the only ones who knew the truth. Maya had warned her. "This is dangerous, Elara," she had said over coffee in Elara's real home, the penthouse. "You are building a marriage on a lie. What if his family is awful? What if they treat you badly, because they think you are poor? Then I will know they aren't the right family for me," Elara had replied stubbornly. "I need to know, Maya. I need to know he chooses me when I have nothing." She thought she found real love. She was so wrong. The red flags started waving the moment she met the Montgomerys. Marcus took her to Sunday dinner at his parents' estate in Connecticut. The house was grand, filled with antique furniture and portraits of ancestors who looked like they had never smiled in their lives. Victoria and Arthur Montgomery were the definition of old money snobbery. Except, as Elara would later find out, the money was mostly gone, leaving only the snobbery behind. Victoria looked at Elara like she was something she had stepped in on the sidewalk. Her eyes scanned Elara's simple dress and sensible shoes with undisguised disgust. "So," Victoria had said, swirling her wine glass. "Marcus tells us you are a graphic designer? How quaint. Do you actually make a living doing that, or are you just looking for a husband to support you?" Elara had felt the sting of the insult, but she forced a smile. "I get by, Mrs. Montgomery. I enjoy the creative freedom." Enjoy. 7. W times 4. 1. W times 4. Arthur had just grunted, burying his face in the Wall Street Journal. "Creative freedom doesn't pay for private schools or country club memberships," he muttered. "Marcus needs a wife who understands the responsibilities of our social standing." But the worst part of that dinner wasn't the parents. It was the guest who was already seated at the table when they arrived, Serena. Victoria introduced Serena as her goddaughter and practically family. Serena was tall, blonde, and radiated the kind of effortless superiority that came from never having worked a day in her life. She was sitting in the seat next to Marcus, the seat that should have been Elara's. Throughout the entire dinner, Serena touched Marcus's arm, laughed too loudly at his unfunny jokes, and shot Elara little pitying smiles. "It is so brave of you to wear that," Serena had whispered to Elara when the men left the room. "I love how you just don't care about fashion trends. It must be so freeing to be simple." Elara should have run. She should have called her driver, gone back to her penthouse, and blocked their numbers. But Marcus seemed different when they were alone. He apologized for his parents. He told her he didn't care about their obsession with status. He told her he loved her simplicity. He made her feel like they were a team fighting against the expectations of his toxic family. When Marcus proposed 6 months later, Victoria threw a fit that could be heard 3 towns over. She screamed that he was ruining his life. She threatened to cut him off from the trust fund, a trust fund Elara later learned was almost empty. Arthur refused to pay for the wedding. So, Elara paid for it. Or rather, Elara the graphic designer scraped together her savings to pay for a small, intimate ceremony. In reality, she transferred a tiny fraction of her weekly interest earnings into her fake checking account. She wanted a small wedding anyway. She didn't want the press to find her. The wedding day was cold and joyless. Victoria sat in the front row, wearing black, as if she were attending a funeral. Arthur checked his watch every 5 minutes. Serena showed up wearing a white lace dress that looked suspiciously like a bridal gown, claiming it was cream and just a cocktail dress. She spent the reception dancing with Marcus, while Elara sat at the head table, watching her new husband spin another woman around the floor. That was when the doubt started to creep in. That was when the voice in the back of Elara's head started whispering that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a fairy tale. Maybe it was a tragedy waiting to unfold. Their honeymoon was supposed to be 2 weeks in Bali. It lasted 3 days. Arthur called with a business emergency involving the family manufacturing plant. He claimed they needed Marcus back immediately to handle a crisis. Marcus left Elara alone in the hotel room to fly back, claiming he had no choice. Elara spent the rest of her honeymoon sitting on a beautiful beach, alone, staring at the ocean. She called Julian. "Look into Montgomery Manufacturing," she ordered. "I want to know what this emergency is." Julian called back 4 hours later. "There is no emergency, Elara," he said, his voice hesitant. "The company is failing, yes. They are hemorrhaging money. They are drowning in debt. But there was no specific crisis today. However, I did find something else. Flight records show that Serena Vance booked a ticket to New York on the same flight as Marcus." Elara felt a chill that the tropical sun couldn't warm. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Julian said. "Elara, they are using you. I think they are looking for a bailout. Rumors in the financial sector are that Arthur is desperate. They might be hoping Marcus' marriage will distract creditors, or maybe they just want to control him." I laughed it off then. I was in denial. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself Marcus loved me. I hadn't told him the truth about my money yet, and I decided to keep waiting. I needed to be sure. Then, the stick turned pink. I was pregnant. Elara was overjoyed. She thought a baby would change everything. She imagined telling Marcus, seeing his face light up, finally becoming a real family. She thought a grandchild would melt Victoria's icy heart. She organized a dinner to share the news. She cooked for 3 hours, making a roast in the small kitchen of her apartment. When Marcus, Victoria, and Arthur arrived, Serena was with them, of course. She walked in without knocking, criticizing the smell of the food immediately. "It smells like onions in here," Serena complained, wrinkling her nose. "Marcus, how can you breathe?" Elara ignored her. She waited until they were seated. Her hands were shaking as she placed the ultrasound picture on the table. "I have news," she said, smiling through her nerves. "We're having a baby." The silence was deafening. No one cheered, no one smiled. Victoria picked up the photo by the corner, as if it were contaminated. "Well," she sighed, dropping it back onto the table. "I suppose accidents happen when one isn't careful." Arthur groaned. "Can we afford this, Marcus? Babies are expensive." And with her, he gestured vaguely at Elara. "She brings nothing to the table. You will be supporting 2 dependents now." Serena leaned over and patted Marcus's hand. "Oh, poor Marcus. Your life is really over now, isn't it? No more fun weekends, just diapers and crying." Marcus didn't defend her. He didn't tell them to shut up. He just looked at the ultrasound and sighed. "We will figure it out," he said, without looking at Elara. That was the moment the love died. It didn't die with a bang. It died with a whimper. It died in the silence of a husband who wouldn't stand up for his wife. It died in the cruel sneer of a mother-in-law who saw a grandchild as a burden. Elara went to the bathroom that night, and looked at herself in the mirror. She touched her stomach. "They don't deserve us," she whispered to the life growing inside her. "And they are going to pay for this." But she didn't leave. Not yet. She needed to know the full extent of their treachery. She needed to see how far they would go. She decided to play the long game. She would be the dutiful, poor, struggling wife. She would let them dig their own graves, and when the time was right, she would push them in. For the next 9 months, she watched, she listened, and she prepared for war. The torture began in earnest during the 2nd trimester. It wasn't physical, at least not in the way that leaves bruises, but it was a systematic dismantling of Elara's dignity. Under the pretense of helping the struggling young couple, Victoria insisted that Elara and Marcus move into a rental property owned by a distant cousin of the Montgomery family. It was a small, drafty bungalow, just 10 minutes from the Montgomery estate. Elara had wanted to refuse. She wanted to scream that she could buy a mansion in the Hamptons with the interest her portfolio earned in a single week, but she couldn't. Not yet. She had to play the role of the destitute wife, perfectly, to trap them in their own greed. So, she moved in. And that was when she lost the last shred of her privacy. Victoria had a key, of course. She didn't believe in knocking. She would simply breeze through the front door at all hours of the day, usually with Serena trailing behind her like a well-dressed shadow. They treated Elara's home not as a sanctuary, but as a project that was failing due to poor management. One Tuesday afternoon, Elara came home from a client meeting which was actually a board meeting for Vantage Tech she had taken remotely from a coffee shop to find Victoria and Serena standing in her living room. They were holding up her throw pillows with the tips of their fingers, examining them as if they were infested with lice. Polyester, Victoria announced, dropping the pillow back onto the couch with a grimace. It is just so sad, isn't it, Serena? Marcus used to sleep on Egyptian cotton. Now he comes home to this. Serena sighed, walking around the room and touching Elara's things with blatant disrespect. It's not her fault, Victoria. She doesn't know any better. When you grow up with nothing, you think Target is high fashion. She turned to Elara, offering a smile that didn't reach her cold, dead eyes. We are just trying to help, Elara. We're going to redecorate the nursery. The baby simply cannot be brought home to a room that looks like a garage sale. Elara felt the familiar heat rising in her chest, but she forced it down. I have already picked out a theme, she said, keeping her voice steady. I want soft yellows and grays. Victoria laughed, a sharp, barking sound. Yellows and grays? How pedestrian. No, Serena has excellent taste. She has ordered a custom crib from Italy and hand-painted wallpaper. It will be a proper room for a Montgomery heir. And who is paying for this? Elara asked, knowing the answer. We are, of course, Serena chirped. Consider it my gift to the baby, since, you know, you can't exactly afford the best. For the next 3 months, Elara was a ghost in her own home. She would sit in the kitchen, pretending to work on graphic design logos for $50, while in the next room, Victoria and Serena planned her son's life. They discussed nannies, private schools, and summer camps. They talked about the baby as if Elara were merely the vessel carrying him, an incubator that would be discarded once the job was done. But the breaking point, the moment that turned Elara's sadness into cold, hard strategy, came in her 8th month. Elara had come home early from a prenatal yoga class. The house was quiet, but she saw Victoria's car in the driveway. She entered through the back door, moving silently across the linoleum floor. She heard voices coming from the dining room. I spoke to the lawyers this morning. Victoria's voice drifted down the hallway. It was hushed, conspiratorial. Elara froze. She pressed her back against the wall, holding her breath. And that was Serena. It is tricky, but doable, Victoria said. In the state of New York, custody usually favors the mother. However, if we can prove financial instability and lack of a support system, we have a case. Once the brat is born, we let her struggle for a few weeks. We let the sleep deprivation set in. Then, we hit her with the paperwork. We offer her a small settlement to sign over rights. If she refuses, we sue. We bury her in legal fees she can't afford. What about Marcus? Serena asked. Is he on board? Victoria scoffed. Marcus does what I tell him to do. He knows he made a mistake marrying that gold digger. He wants you, Serena. He wants his real life back. He just needs us to clean up the mess. Elara felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the drafty house. They weren't just being mean. They were plotting to steal her child. They were planning to erase her from her son's life completely. She didn't storm into the room. She didn't scream or cry. She turned around, walked softly out the back door, and got into her car. She drove 2 blocks away, parked, and pulled out her burner phone, the secure line she used for business. Julian, she said the moment he answered. I need a team at my house within the hour. Audio and video surveillance. Every room. I want to hear a pin drop in that house. And get the private investigators on overtime. I want photos, Julian. I want dates, times, and receipts. If Marcus buys a pack of gum, I want to know about it. Consider it done, Julian said, his voice grim. "Are you okay, Elara?" "No," Elara said, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were hard as flint. "But I will be." The surveillance revealed everything. For the last month of her pregnancy, Elara watched the feed from her laptop in her office. She watched Serena and Marcus drinking wine on her couch while she was ostensibly asleep in the bedroom. She watched them touch, kiss, and laugh about how gullible Elara was. She heard Marcus complaining about her cheap clothes and her boring personality. She heard Serena mocking Elara's swollen ankles. The private investigator's report was the final nail in the coffin. It arrived in a plain manila envelope. Inside were high-resolution photos of Marcus and Serena entering the Ritz-Carlton. There were receipts for jewelry, including the vintage diamond earrings Elara had noticed Serena wearing last week. There were credit card statements showing dinners costing $500, charged to a card Marcus claimed was maxed out when Elara asked for money for prenatal vitamins. Elara organized it all. She scanned every receipt, backed up every video file, and sent copies to 3 separate secure cloud servers. She wasn't just a wife anymore. She was a CEO preparing for a hostile takeover. She drafted the divorce papers herself, hiding the file under the name Grocery List PDF. She reviewed the prenup Marcus had signed, the one he hadn't bothered to read because he thought she had no assets to protect. It had a ruthless infidelity clause. If he cheated, he forfeited any claim to marital assets. Labor started at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. It began with a sharp twisting pain in her lower back that radiated forward, stealing her breath. Elara sat up in bed, gasping. The space next to her was empty. Marcus hadn't come home. He had texted her at 10 p.m., saying he was pulling an all-nighter at the office to try and save the family business. Elara knew exactly where he was. The GPS tracker the PI had put on his car showed him at Serena's apartment in the Upper East Side. She grabbed her phone and dialed him. It went straight to voicemail. She dialed again. Voicemail. "Please," she whispered to the empty room, a tear sliding down her cheek despite her resolve. "Just this once, Marcus. Be a father." She called a third time. He rejected the call. A text message popped up a minute later. "In a crucial meeting. Can't talk. Stop calling." Elara stared at the screen. A crucial meeting at 2 a.m. with his mistress. The pain hit her again, harder this time, doubling her over. She realized with terrifying clarity that she was doing this alone. She called Julian. "Elara?" He answered on the first ring, his voice instantly alert. "It's time," she gasped. "I need a ride." Julian was there in 15 minutes. He drove her to Mount Sinai Hospital, holding her hand while she breathed through the contractions. He checked her in, bypassing the general admission and getting her into the private VIP suite she had secretly paid for months ago under her maiden name. The labor was 14 hours of agony, 14 hours of her body tearing itself apart to bring life into the world. 14 hours, where the father of her child was nowhere to be found. Julian stayed by her side, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, feeding her ice chips, and being the partner Marcus refused to be. "He should be here," Julian muttered darkly, as Elara gripped the bedrails, her knuckles white. "I should go drag him here." "No," Elara panted, sweat matting her hair to her forehead. "Let him stay away. It makes the ending cleaner." Marcus finally showed up 20 minutes after Noah was born. Elara was holding her son, her body battered and exhausted. When the door opened, Marcus walked in, looking disheveled but not from work. He smelled of Serena's expensive floral perfume. There was a smudge of lipstick on his collar that he had missed. Traffic was a nightmare, he lied smoothly, not even looking at the baby yet. And the meeting ran long. "I'm sorry, Elara, how did it go?" He asked it like he was asking about a trip to the dentist. Elara looked at him. She saw the lipstick. She smelled the perfume. She saw the lie sitting comfortably behind his eyes. And in that moment, whatever tiny, lingering hope she had that he might change, that fatherhood might redeem him, turned to ash. "It went fine," she said quietly. "He is here." Marcus glanced at the bundle in her arms. He didn't reach out to hold him. He checked his watch. "That's great. Listen, my parents are on their way. They want to discuss some things. Legal things." "Legal things," Elara repeated. "Now?" "It's important," Marcus said, shifting his weight. "We need to settle the future." "Yes," Elara said, looking down at Noah's sleeping face. We certainly do. She waited until Marcus stepped into the hallway to take a call likely to summon Serena. Then she pulled her phone from under her pillow. She opened the secure app connected to her legal team. Execute the purchase, she typed to her head of acquisitions. Montgomery Industries, the debt, the assets, everything, do it now. A confirmation popped up 10 seconds later. Transaction complete. You are the owner of record. Elara put the phone down. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of her newborn son. The pain of labor was fading, replaced by the adrenaline of battle. They were coming to destroy her. They were coming to take her son and throw her on the street. They were walking into a trap. And Elara was ready to snap the jaws shut. The silence that followed Elara's phone call was heavy, suffocating, and filled with a tension so thick it felt physical. She had placed the phone back on the bedside table, the screen still glowing with the duration of the call to Julian. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the soft, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor and the distant hum of the hospital ventilation system. Victoria was the first to break the silence. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh that sounded more like a bark. She looked at Arthur, then at Marcus, shaking her head with exaggerated pity. Postpartum psychosis, she declared, adjusting the lapel of her Chanel jacket. It is sadder than I thought. She is hallucinating, Arthur. She thinks she is making business deals. We really should have her evaluated before we take the baby. It will look better for us in court if we can prove she is mentally unstable. Arthur chuckled, a low, rumbling sound of dismissal. He stepped closer to the bed, looming over Elara with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no in his life. A nice performance, Elara, he sneered. Who was that on the phone? The pizza delivery boy? You don't have a staff. You don't have a portfolio. You have a checking account that is probably overdrawn and a husband who is leaving you. Now, stop this nonsense, and sign the papers. Elara didn't flinch. She didn't shrink away. She adjusted her position against the pillows, sitting straighter, her posture shifting from that of an exhausted new mother to that of a boardroom executive. She looked Arthur dead in the eye, her gaze so piercing that he actually paused, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. Check your email, Arthur, Elara said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a weight of authority that cut through his bluster. Arthur frowned. What? Your phone, Elara repeated, gesturing vaguely to the pocket of his expensive suit. You have your business alerts set to high priority, don't you? I heard it buzz 3 times while you were threatening to steal my son. Go ahead, look. Arthur hesitated, annoyed, but the absolute certainty in her voice made him reach into his pocket. He pulled out his phone, rolling his eyes at Victoria as he unlocked the screen. I don't know what game you are playing, but it ends. He stopped mid-sentence. Elara watched with a cold, predatory satisfaction as the color drained from Arthur's face. It started at his chin and washed upward, leaving him looking gray and sickly. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He swiped at the screen frantically, reading, then scrolling, then reading again. His hands, which had been steady a moment ago, began to shake. What is it? Victoria asked, stepping forward, her annoyance turning to confusion. Arthur? What is wrong? Arthur looked up from the phone, his eyes wide and terrified. He looked at Elara, not as a piece of trash anymore, but as if she were a ghost who had just walked out of a wall. It says our debt has been sold, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The manufacturing loans, the lines of credit, the mortgage on the estate. All of it. It was just purchased in a bulk acquisition. By who? Marcus asked, stepping away from Serena. Who bought it, Dad? The bank said they wouldn't sell. Arthur swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. It was purchased by a holding company called Vance Capital. The room went deadly silent again. Vance. Serena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Vance? She whispered. Like, Elara Vance? Elara smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. Allow me to reintroduce myself, she said, her voice steady and clear. My name is Elara Vance. I am the founder and CEO of Vantage Tech Systems. My net worth as of this morning's market opening is $3.7 billion, And as of 2 minutes ago, I own you. Victoria stumbled back as if she had been slapped. She grabbed the edge of the visitor's chair to steady herself. No, she hissed. That's a lie. You are a graphic designer. You live in a studio apartment. You drive a Honda. You are nobody. I am a graphic designer, Elara corrected calmly. I designed the architecture for the artificial intelligence systems that run half the world's banking software. And yes, I live in a studio apartment in Brooklyn. A building which, by the way, I bought for $45 million 3 years ago because I liked the brickwork. I own the entire block, Victoria. I own the way. I just chose to live simply to see if your son could love me without my money. She turned her gaze to Marcus. He looked like he was going to be sick. He was staring at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The realization was crashing down on him, the missed clues, the strange security on her laptop, the work trip she took. You have billions? Marcus choked out. But you let us pay for dinner? You let me buy you that cheap car? I wanted to see who you were, Elara said, her voice devoid of emotion. I wanted to see if you were a man of character. I wanted to see if you would defend me when your family treated me like dirt. I wanted to see if you would be faithful. She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. You failed every single test, Marcus. But the charity gala, Serena interrupted, her voice shrill and panicked. We met you there. You were a server. You were wearing a cheap black dress and someone spilled champagne on you. Elara laughed softly. I wasn't a server, Serena. I was the donor. I had just written a $5 million check to the hospital anonymously. I stepped out of the VIP lounge because I hate the pretension of people like you. The waiter spilled champagne on me, and I didn't make a scene because unlike you, I don't believe in humiliating people who are working for a living. She pointed to the door of the hospital room. If you walk down the hallway to the elevators, look at the plaque on the wall of the new pediatric wing. It used to say, Anonymous. My assistant just updated the digital donor registry. It now reads, the Elara Vance wing. Arthur was furiously tapping on his phone again, likely searching her name. He looked up, his face glistening with sweat. It's true, he whispered, showing the screen to Victoria. It was a Forbes article, The Ghost CEO, How Elara Vance Built an Empire from the Shadows. The photo was unmistakably her, though she looked sharper, dressed in a power suit, standing in front of a glass skyscraper. So, Elara said, clasping her hands over the blanket. Let's discuss your current situation. Arthur, your company, Montgomery Industries, has been insolvent for 2 years. You have been floating on loans you can't pay back. You owe $200 million to various creditors. Those creditors were getting impatient. They were about to foreclose. We were handling it, Arthur shouted, though his voice lacked conviction. We had a restructuring plan. Your plan was to marry Marcus off to Serena because her father promised to invest. Elara cut him off. I know. I heard you discussing it in my kitchen 3 months ago. But Serena's father isn't going to invest in a sinking ship, Arthur. And now, he can't. Because I own the debt. I am your only creditor now. She leaned forward. And I am calling the loans. Immediately, Arthur paled. You can't do that. We have terms. We have. Read the fine print of the acquisition, Elara said coldly. There is an immediate repayment clause in the event of a change of ownership. You have 24 hours to pay me $200 million. Can you do that, Arthur? Arthur slumped against the wall. He looked 20 years older than he had 5 minutes ago. No, he rasped. We don't have the liquidity. Then I will accept assets in lieu of cash, Elara said. I will take the manufacturing plant. I will take the patent portfolio. I will take the brand. That's the family legacy. Victoria shrieked. You can't take our company. It has been in the Montgomery name for 4 generations. And it took you 1 generation to run it into the ground, Elara shot back. It's mine now. I'm going to dissolve it, sell the parts, and turn the factory into a shelter for homeless women. I think that's a much better use of the space, don't you? Victoria looked like she was having a stroke. She turned to Marcus, grabbing his arm. Do something, she is your wife. You can't let her do this to us. Marcus stepped toward the bed. He tried to put on his charming face, the one he had used to woo her 2 years ago, but it was cracked and broken. Elara, he said, his voice trembling. Baby, please, let's calm down. We made a mistake, okay? We messed up, but we can fix this. I didn't know, if I had known. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me better? Elara finished for him. Is that what you're saying, Marcus? That I only deserve respect if I can buy it? No, that's not it, Marcus stammered, sweating profusely. I love you. I've always loved you. The stuff with Serena, it was just pressure. My parents pressured me. I was confused. Elara looked at Serena, who was standing frozen near the window. He says he was confused. Serena, he says he loves me. Does that sound like the man who has been sleeping in your bed for 4 months? Serena glared at Marcus. Betrayed. You coward, she spat. You told me she was a boring, frumpy nobody. You told me you couldn't wait to get rid of her. I was lying. Marcus shouted at Serena, then turned back to Elara with a desperate, pleading look. Elara, please. We have a son. Look at Noah. He needs his father. We can be a power couple. Think about it. Your tech empire, my family name, we can rule this city. Just tear up the divorce papers. Let's start over, please. He reached out to touch her hand. Don't touch me, Elara said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was so lethal that Marcus recoiled as if he had touched a hot stove. You want to talk about Noah? Elara continued. You stood there 10 minutes ago and watched your mother threaten to take him away from me. You watched them hand me divorce papers while I was bleeding. You were going to leave me destitute with a newborn. And now, because you see dollar signs, suddenly you want to be a family? She reached into the folder Arthur had thrown on the bed, the custody agreement. She held it up and ripped it in half. The sound of tearing paper was loud in the quiet room. You aren't a father, Marcus, Elara said. You are a parasite, and I am cutting you off. You can't keep him from me. Marcus yelled, his desperation turning to anger. I have rights. I am his father. Actually, Elara said, pulling another document from her bag, the one Julian had prepared. You signed those rights away. Remember the prenup? The one you laughed at? The one you signed without reading because you thought I was the one with nothing to protect? Marcus went still. What? I insisted on a prenup, Elara said. You thought it was cute. You thought I was trying to protect my graphic design savings. But that document protects my assets. And it has a very specific clause regarding infidelity. She opened the folder and turned it to face him. Clause 4, Section B. In the event of proven infidelity, the cheating party forfeits all claims to marital assets, spousal support, and here is the kicker, agrees to sole custody remaining with a faithful party if the infidelity occurred during pregnancy, due to the emotional distress caused to the child. That won't hold up in court, Arthur sputtered. That's draconian. I have 47 lawyers on retainer, Elara said, leaning back and crossing her arms. My lead counsel is former Senator Holloway. Who do you have, Arthur? The strip mall lawyer who handled your bankruptcy filing? She looked at the stunned faces of the people who had tried to destroy her. The shift in power was absolute. They had walked in as kings and queens, ready to execute a peasant. Now, they were realizing they were standing in the dragon's den, and the dragon was awake. I am taking everything, Elara said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than a scream. The company, the house, the reputation, and my son. You will never see him again. You will never see me again. She reached for the call button on the side of her bed. Now, get out of my room before I have security drag you out. But she wasn't done yet. She had dealt the financial blow, but there was one more personal humiliation left to deliver. She turned her eyes to Serena, who was trying to slide quietly toward the door. Not so fast, Serena, Elara said. We need to talk about that ring. Serena froze, her hand hovering over the door handle. She turned slowly, her face a mask of terrified defiance. She clutched her left hand to her chest, covering the diamond that sparkled under the harsh hospital lights. What are you talking about? She demanded, though her voice lacked the arrogant lilt it had carried only minutes before. This is my ring. Marcus gave it to me. It's a family heirloom. Elara let out a short, dry laugh that sounded like a gavel striking a block. She picked up the tablet again, her movements deliberate and menacing. It was a family heirloom, Elara corrected. A 3.5-carat cushion-cut diamond set in platinum, dating back to the 1,920 seconds. It was appraised at $85,000. It was the one thing Marcus had left of any real value. Exactly, Serena spat, regaining a sliver of her confidence. And now it's mine. He gave it to me because I am the woman he actually loves. No, Serena, Elara said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, he gave you a piece of glass. The room went silent. Marcus looked up from where he was slumped against the wall, his eyes wide. What? Elara swiped the screen of her tablet and turned it around so they could all see. It was a video feed, dated 4 months prior. The timestamp in the corner marked it as late afternoon. The camera angle was high, hidden in the crown molding of the master bedroom in the rental house. The footage showed Elara opening her jewelry box, taking out the ring, and replacing it with an identical-looking band. She then placed the real ring into a small velvet pouch and locked it in a hidden wall safe behind the dresser. I noticed the ring had been moved, Elara explained, her eyes locked on Serena. I noticed it wasn't sitting at the right angle in the box. I suspected someone was going through my things. So, I had a replica made. High-grade cubic zirconia in a silver setting, cost me about $40 on Amazon. I swapped them out to see if my suspicions were correct. She swiped to the next video file. This one was dated 2 weeks later. The footage showed Serena unmistakably. Serena sneaking into the bedroom while Elara was out. She moved quickly to the jewelry box, opened it, and plucked the ring from the velvet cushion. She slipped it onto her finger, admired it in the mirror, and then shoved it into her purse before hurrying out of the room. You didn't receive a gift, Serena, Elara said coldly. You committed grand larceny, and since the item you thought you were stealing is valued over $1,000, that is a felony. The fact that it turned out to be a $40 fake doesn't change your intent. Serena looked down at her hand, horror dawning on her face. She tried to pull the ring off, her fingers fumbling in panic, but her hands were shaking too badly. I didn't know, she stammered. Marcus said I could have it. He said it was ours. Did he? Elara asked, arching an eyebrow at her husband. Because in the police report I filed this morning, I listed the ring as stolen. And now I have video evidence of you taking it. That puts you in a very difficult position, Serena. You can either admit you stole it, or Marcus can admit he gave away marital property to his mistress, which would be another strike against him in the divorce proceedings. Which lie do you want to tell? Serena ripped the ring off her finger and threw it onto the floor. It bounced with a hollow, cheap sound that echoed in the silence. I don't want it, she screamed. I don't want any of this. You people are crazy. We aren't done yet, Elara said, her voice cutting through Serena's hysteria like a knife. She turned her attention back to the stack of papers on her lap. We have discussed the company debt. We have discussed the ring. Now, let's discuss the future of the Montgomery family. She picked up a thick document bound in blue leather. The prenuptial agreement, she announced. Marcus, you really should have read this. My lawyers drafted it to be ironclad. You signed it because you were so arrogant you thought you were the one doing me a favor by marrying me. You thought you were protecting your non-existent millions from a poor graphic designer. Marcus flinched. I trusted you, he whispered weakly. No, you underestimated me, Elara corrected. Clause 7, subsection C, the infidelity clause. It states that, if either party is found to be engaging in an extramarital affair, confirmed by digital evidence or private investigation, that party forfeits all rights to alimony, spousal support, and any claim to the other party's assets acquired during the marriage. Furthermore, they accept full liability for any joint debts incurred. She looked at him with a pity that was worse than hatred. I have 4 months of evidence, Marcus. Hotel receipts, text messages, geolocation data, and the video of you and Serena in my house. You are leaving this marriage with absolutely nothing. The clothes on your back are the only assets you own. And actually, since you put the down payment on your Porsche using a joint credit card I paid off, I'm taking the car, too. You can't leave him with nothing, Victoria shrieked, stepping in front of her son like a shield. He is a Montgomery. He has a standard of living. He had a standard of living, Elara corrected. Now he has a reality check. He can move back in with you, Victoria. Oh, wait, he can't. Elara turned her gaze to Arthur and Victoria. This was the part she had been waiting for. The financial ruin was just business. this part was personal. This was for every time Victoria had sneered at her shoes. This was for every time Arthur had made her feel small. Arthur, Elara said, shifting into full CEO mode. Regarding the $200 million debt you now owe me. I am not interested in a payment plan. I am calling the note due immediately. Since you cannot pay, I am exercising my right to seize collateral. We will sue, Arthur blustered, though he was shaking. We will tie this up in court for years. You can try, Elara said, but I have more money to spend on legal fees in a day than you have had in a decade. I will drain you dry before we even get to a preliminary hearing. Or, you can accept my offer. Arthur's eyes narrowed. What offer? I will forgive the personal debt, Elara said. I will wipe the slate clean so you don't go to prison for fraud, and yes, I know about the creative accounting you did last year to hide your losses. My auditors found that in 10 minutes, Arthur went pale. The threat of prison was real, and he knew it. In exchange, Elara continued, you will sign over the deed to the estate immediately. You will sign over full ownership of Montgomery Industries. And you will vacate the premises by tomorrow morning. You leave with your personal effects only. No furniture, no art, no cars. Just your clothes and your pride, if you have any left. Where will we go? Victoria whispered, her voice trembling. That house, it is our life. I suggest you look for a rental, Elara said coldly. I hear the market is tough right now. Maybe a 2-bedroom condo? It will be cozy. Just like the pedestrian home you forced me to live in. Victoria looked like she was about to faint. She grabbed Arthur's arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. Do something, Arthur. She is destroying us. She already has, Arthur muttered, defeated. He looked at Elara, his eyes filled with hate and fear. You are a monster. I am a mother, Elara said, looking down at Noah. And a mother protects her child from toxic environments. Speaking of which, she tapped her tablet again. Victoria, I know how much you value your social standing. The Greenwich Country Club, the Charity League, the Botanical Garden Board. You sit on all of them, don't you? Victoria straightened up, trying to salvage some dignity. I am a pillar of this community. They respect me. They respected your checkbook, Elara said, but I just sent an email to the board of directors for each of those organizations. I attached an audio file. It's a recording of you from 2 months ago, calling the charity recipients ungrateful leeches and making some very colorful comments about the club president's wife. Victoria's mouth dropped open. You recorded that? I recorded everything, Elara reminded her. I also informed them that as the new owner of the Montgomery estate and the primary donor for the hospital wing, I would be uncomfortable associating with an organization that condones such behavior. They responded 3 minutes ago. Elara held up the tablet. Your memberships have been revoked, Victoria, effective immediately. You are blacklisted, no more galas, no more luncheons, no more looking down your nose at people. You are a social pariah. Victoria let out a strangled sob. For a woman like her, this was a fate worse than death. Stripped of her money and her status, she was nothing. She collapsed into the visitor chair, weeping into her hands. Finally, Elara turned to Serena. The mistress had been inching toward the door again, hoping to slip away while the family was being executed. Serena, Elara called out. Don't leave yet. We haven't discussed your career. Serena spun around, her eyes wild. You can't do anything to me. I have a contract. I am the face of Loom Cosmetics. Not anymore, Elara said pleasantly. You see, Loom Cosmetics is a subsidiary of Aurelius Group. And Aurelius Group was acquired by Vantage Tech last quarter. I own the brand, Serena. And I have a strict moral clause for my brand ambassadors. She tapped the screen one last time. I just forwarded the video of you stealing my ring and the police report to the head of marketing. Your contract is terminated. You will be sued for breach of contract, and you will be required to pay back the advance you received. You're bluffing, Serena cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. You can't control everything. I control the things that matter, Elara said. I also own a 40% stake in your modeling agency. I just called the owner. He agrees that a thief and a homewrecker isn't the image they want to promote. You're dropped, Serena. You're done. You'll be lucky to get a job cataloging socks for a department store. Serena leaned against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. She buried her face in her knees, sobbing loudly. The room was filled with the sounds of their destruction. Victoria's weeping, Serena's wailing, Marcus's pathetic stammering, and Arthur's heavy, defeated breathing. Elara felt a profound sense of calm wash over her. It wasn't joy, it wasn't happiness. It was the deep, satisfying weight of justice. She had taken their cruelty, their greed, and their arrogance, and she had turned it into a mirror, forcing them to look at exactly who they were. She pressed the call button on her bedside rail, twice the signal she had arranged with Julian. The door to the hospital room burst open. But it wasn't a nurse. It was a team of 6 large men in dark suits, wearing earpieces. They filled the room, their presence commanding and professional. "Miss Vance," the lead security officer said, nodding respectfully to Elara. "Is there a problem?" "Yes," Elara said, her voice ringing with authority. "These people are trespassing. They are harassing me and my son. Please escort them out of the building, and ensure they do not come within 500 feet of this hospital or my residence." "Understood," the officer said. He turned to the Montgomerys. "Let's go." "Now." "You can't touch us," Marcus yelled, trying to muster some last shred of bravado. "I am her husband." "Not for long," the officer said, grabbing Marcus by the arm and hauling him toward the door. It was a chaotic, pathetic scene. Victoria had to be physically lifted from the chair, screaming about her rights. Arthur walked out like a zombie, staring blankly ahead. Serena was dragged out sobbing, leaving her fake ring on the floor. Marcus tried to look back at Elara, shouting, "Elara, please. We can fix this." But Elara didn't look at him. She looked down at Noah. She gently stroked his cheek with her finger. The baby stirred, opening his eyes for a moment before settling back into sleep. The security team shoved the group into the hallway. The heavy door clicked shut, cutting off their screams instantly. The silence that followed was beautiful. It was the silence of victory. Elara took a deep breath, her lungs filling with air that suddenly felt cleaner. She was alone. She was a single mother, she was divorced, but she wasn't broken. She was free. The door opened softly a moment later. Julian walked in, a small smile on his face. He looked at the empty room, then at the fake ring on the floor. He walked over, picked it up, and dropped it into the trash can. "The car is ready, Elara," Julian said softly. "The penthouse is prepped, the staff is waiting. Everything is set up for Noah." Elara looked up at him. "Did the press get the release?" "Yes," Julian said. "It's trending worldwide. Billionaire CEO reveals secret marriage and betrayal. The stock price for Vantage Tech is actually up 2%. The market loves a strong leader." Elara smiled. "Good. Let's go home, Julian." She carefully wrapped Noah in the soft cashmere blanket. Julian had brought no more scratchy hospital linens. She stood up, her legs a little shaky but holding strong. She walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere down there, the Montgomerys were standing on the sidewalk, realizing their lives were over. Up here, Elara Vance was just getting started. "We are going to be okay, little one," she whispered to her son. "Better than okay. We are going to be untouchable." Leaving the hospital was the first breath of fresh air Elara had taken in nearly a year. She didn't leave through the back exit, hiding from the world. She walked out the front doors, head held high, surrounded by her security team, with Noah secure in a sleek, black stroller. The paparazzi were there, alerted by the press release Julian had issued. But for the first time, the flashing bulbs didn't feel invasive. They felt like a spotlight on her victory. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the titan who had survived the storm. The car ride to her penthouse was silent and smooth, a stark contrast to the chaotic, rattling drive to the hospital in a taxi just days before. When the elevator doors opened directly into her foyer, Elara finally let her guard down. The space was vast, bathed in natural light from floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. It was filled with modern art, soft cream rugs, and the scent of fresh orchids. It was a fortress of peace. Her best friend Maya was waiting for her, tears in her eyes. Maya didn't say a word. She just hugged Elara, careful of the stroller, and held her for a long time. For the first week, Elara did nothing but bond with her son. She sat in the nursery she had designed months ago, not the sad, beige room Serena had tried to force on her, but a wonderland of soft blues and hand-painted stars. She held Noah, fed him, and whispered promises of a future where he would never know what it felt like to be unwanted. While Elara healed, the world outside was systematically tearing the Montgomery family apart. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. The story of the billionaire CEO, posing as a graphic designer to test her husband's loyalty, had captured the public's imagination. It was a modern fairy tale with a dark twist, and everyone wanted to see the villains punished. Arthur and Victoria Montgomery faced the harshest reality check of their lives. The deadline to vacate their estate came and went, and true to her word, Elara's legal team arrived with the sheriff. It was a humiliating spectacle. The neighbors, the same people Victoria had tried to impress for 40 years, watched from behind their curtains as movers hauled the Montgomerys' personal belongings onto the curb. They left with nothing but their clothes and a few boxes of personal items. The furniture, the art, the grand piano Arthur loved to pose next to but couldn't play it all belonged to Elara now. They moved into a cramped, two-bedroom condo in a neighborhood Victoria would have previously refused to drive through. The walls were thin, the carpet was stained, and the view was of a brick wall. But the loss of luxury was nothing compared to the loss of status. Victoria attempted to go to her usual hair salon the week after the eviction. The receptionist, a young woman Victoria had often criticized, smiled politely and informed her that her appointment had been cancelled. "We are fully booked for the foreseeable future, Mrs. Montgomery," she said. "And your credit card on file was declined." Victoria had to walk out, her roots showing, while the other patrons whispered behind their magazines. The audio recording of her calling charity recipients leeches had gone viral. She was no longer the grande dame of society. She was a pariah. Friends she had known for decades stopped returning her calls. Dinner invitations dried up. She was alone in a small apartment with a husband who blamed her for everything. Serena fared no better. The video of her stealing the ring had garnered 20 million views in 3 days. The internet was ruthless. They dissected her fashion, her fake laugh, and her cruelty. The hashtag number, fake ring fake friend, trended for a week. Her modeling agency didn't just fire her. They sued her for damages to their reputation. Loom Cosmetics issued a public statement condemning her actions. Stripped of her income and her social standing, Serena was forced to sell her designer wardrobe just to pay rent. She was eventually spotted by a TikTok user working the counter at a fast fashion outlet in the mall, folding the same cheap clothes she used to mock Elara for wearing. The video was captioned, "Karma never looked so good." But it was Marcus who suffered the most profound collapse. He had lost his wife, his son, his home, and his reputation in a single afternoon. He moved into the cramped condo with his parents, sleeping on a pull-out sofa in the living room because there wasn't a third bedroom. The tension in the small apartment was suffocating. Arthur shouted at him for losing the company. Victoria cried about her lost friends. And Marcus just stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment he realized he had thrown away a diamond to pick up a stone. He tried to find work, but in the tight-knit world of high finance, reputation is everything. Who would hire the man who was foolish enough to cheat on Elara Vance? Who would trust the judgment of a man who couldn't see the value of the woman sleeping next to him? He was radioactive. His friends, the boys he used to drink scotch with, ghosted him. He was uninvited from weddings, and blocked on social media. He became a cautionary tale, a punchline in business schools. 3 months passed, then 6. Elara's life was blossoming. Vantage Tech stock had soared 45%. She was featured on the cover of Time magazine as Person of the Year, but her greatest success wasn't financial. It was the foundation she launched, the Vance Initiative. Its mission was to provide top-tier legal representation and financial aid to women trapped in abusive or coercive marriages, women who were told they were worthless because they had no money. One crisp autumn afternoon, Elara was leaving her office building. She was dressed in a tailored crimson power suit, looking every inch the titan she was. Julian was beside her, discussing the guest list for the upcoming charity gala. A security detail flanked them. As she moved toward her waiting limousine, a man broke through the crowd on the sidewalk. Elara, please." The security team moved instantly, blocking the man's path. But Elara held up a hand. "Wait," she said. She recognized the voice, though it was raspy and desperate. She stepped forward, peering past the shoulder of her bodyguard. It was Marcus. He looked unrecognizable. He had lost weight, his face gaunt and unshaven. He was wearing a suit that didn't fit him right, cheap fabric, wrinkled, likely bought off a clearance rack. His shoes were scuffed. The golden boy of the Montgomery dynasty looked like a beggar. "Elara," he breathed, his eyes filling with tears when he saw her. "Thank God, I have been trying to reach you. Your lawyers block everything." "For good reason," Elara said, her voice cool and detached. She felt nothing, no anger, no pain. Just a mild curiosity, like looking at an old photograph of a stranger. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want to talk," he pleaded, wringing his hands. "I want to see my son. I miss him, I miss us." "There's no us, Marcus," Elara said. "There never was. There was just you, using me, until you found something shinier. And there was me, waiting for you to be a man." "I made a mistake," Marcus shouted, causing passersby to stop and stare. "I was weak, my mother, she got in my head. But I've changed, I've lost everything. Isn't that enough punishment? I'm living on a sofa, Elara. I can't get a job, please, just give me a chance. I can be a father, I can be a good husband. I still love you." Elara looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the desperation, yes, but underneath it, she still saw the selfishness. He wasn't here because he missed Noah. He didn't even ask how Noah was doing or what his first word was. He was here because he was tired of being poor. He was here because he wanted access to the billions he had let slip through his fingers. "You don't love me, Marcus," Elara said softly. "You love the lifestyle I could have given you. You love the idea of being safe. But you traded safety for a thrill. You traded a queen for a pawn because you were too stupid to understand the game." She stepped closer, her voice hardening. "And as for your son? He is happy. He is loved. He is surrounded by men of character, my friends, my staff, my colleagues who will teach him what integrity looks like. He doesn't need a father who only shows up when he needs a loan." "I am his father," Marcus sobbed, falling to his knees on the sidewalk. It was a pathetic display. "You can't do this." "I already did," Elara said. "You signed the papers, Marcus. You chose Serena. You chose the lie. Now you have to live with it." She turned around, signaling her team. "Let's go." "Elara," Marcus screamed behind her as security held him back. "Elara, please." "I have nothing." Elara paused at the door of her car. She looked back one last time. "You have exactly what you deserve," she said. She got into the car and didn't look back as it pulled away into traffic. The paparazzi captured the moment, the billionaire walking away in her red suit, and the ex-husband kneeling on the concrete in his cheap clothes. The headline the next day read, "The Price of Betrayal." Elara didn't even read it. She was too busy planning the future. 1 year after the divorce, Elara hosted the Phoenix Ball. It was the most anticipated event of the decade. Tickets were $10,000 a plate, with all proceeds going to the Vance initiative. The venue was a glass cathedral overlooking the city, filled with the most powerful, influential, and kind-hearted people Elara knew. The Montgomerys were not invited, obviously. But they watched. In their cramped condo, Victoria sat on a worn armchair, staring at the small television screen. Arthur was asleep in front of it, a bottle of cheap whiskey on the table. Marcus was in the kitchen, arguing on the phone with a debt collector. On the screen, the camera panned across the ballroom. It showed the glitter, the glamour, the sheer power in the room. And then, it focused on the stage. Elara walked out. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of shimmering gold, looking like a statue of victory come to life. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't making herself small to fit into someone else's box. She was radiant. She stepped to the microphone, and the room went silent. "Good evening," Elara said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "A year ago, I was in a hospital bed, holding my newborn son, being told that I was worthless. I was told that because I didn't have the right pedigree, or the right connections, that I didn't matter. I was told that my value was determined by the people who wanted to discard me." Victoria flinched at the words, shrinking deeper into her chair. "But tonight," Elara continued, smiling at the crowd, "I am standing here to tell you that they were wrong. Your worth is not found in your bank account, though financial independence is a powerful shield. Your worth is not found in who you marry. Your worth is innate. It is fireproof. It is waterproof. And no matter how hard they try to bury you, if you know who you are, you will always rise. The applause was thunderous. It went on for minutes. Elara looked out at the sea of faces, and then she looked toward the side of the stage. Julian was standing there, holding Noah. The toddler was standing on wobbly legs, clapping his hands and laughing, pointing at his mother. Elara's heart swelled. She had won. She hadn't just defeated the Montgomerys, she had rendered them irrelevant. They were footnotes in her biography, shadows in her past. They wanted her to disappear, but instead, she had become luminous. They wanted to take her child, but instead, she had given him a kingdom. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the lights were dimmed, Elara stood on the balcony of the venue, holding a sleeping Noah in her arms. The city lights twinkled below them like a carpet of diamonds. She thought about the journey, the pain of the betrayal, the fear of the hospital room, the cold rage of the confrontation. It all felt distant now, like a nightmare she had finally woken up from. "We made it," she whispered into Noah's soft hair. "Mama's got you." She turned away from the view, walking back into the warmth of the building where her friends were waiting. She didn't think about Marcus, or Victoria, or Serena. They were in the darkness where they belonged. Elara was walking into the light. Revenge is sweet, but happiness is the ultimate victory. If this story inspired you to know your own worth, hit that like button right now. Make sure you are subscribed and have notifications turned on, because I share stories of resilience every single week. Comment below with "I am unstoppable" to join our community of survivors. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they are stronger than they think. I'm Elara, and remember, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's living so well that you forget they even exist. See you in the next video. End quote. End quote.